Tēnā koutou, good morning and welcome to this council meeting of the 1st of May already, 2025, where we'll be hearing from submitters regarding our proposal around our water services. Welcome to councillors, Community Board Chair Bede Larissy, council staff. We've got 8 people speaking today who are in the gallery. Welcome to you and to any other members of the public. Hello to you who are listening online, and I'll start with the council blessing. Ia mātou e whiriwhiri ana i ngā take ke mua i o mātou aroaro. E pono ana mātou ka kaha tonu ki te whakapau mahara huapai, mona hapuri e mahi ne mātou. Me kaha hoki mātou katoa ki a whaihua ki a tōtika ta mātou mahi. A mata maia te tiru whakamua me te hihiri. Ka taia te arahi I roto I te kotahitanga me te aroha. As we deliberate on the issues before us, we trust that we will reflect positively on the communities we serve. Let us all seek to be effective and just so that with courage, vision and energy we provide positive leadership in a spirit of harmony and compassion. Any apologies? Dem services, do we have any? No. Okay. Yeah, we know that we have Hurrawai Paki online and Councillor Ko online as well. Any declarations of interest? I don't suppose there'll be any today. And we move straight on to hearings. There are 8 submitters registered to speak. We have 3 to 5 minutes speaking time with a further 5 minutes allowance for questions. And as we only have 8 submitters today, I think we can take our time. This is a really important issue, so if you go a little bit over, I'm not going to complain and just bring on the questions. So we've got some, we've been sent the submissions ahead of time. Some really deep thought and effort has gone into these submissions. So I thank all of the submitters who have really investigated this issue and provided us with some very fulsome feedback. So first of all, we have Michael Papesh.
Sorry, can I just ask a question ahead of that? The people who are going to speak, do we have the respondent number for the speakers so that we can access online submission quickly? Because there's 519 of them.
So Michael Papesh is on page 3. I'll read out the page number as we go. So there's a hearings file that's in the folder, in the hub.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
And Michael's is on page 3. Michael, welcome. Come to the table.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. Local Water Done Well is an integrated package of financial and non-financial measures designed to improve water quality across the country and to make water provision financially sustainable. It involves a range of financial measures related to water charging, charging for full costs, including capital costs, revenue ring fencing, creating clear financial pathways to investment for increasing borrowing limits, but with channels to make sure that such debt is serviced, and organisational reform which encourages accessing economies of scale. The package is designed to interface with the funding of remaining council activities to present a least cost option for residents. So it's really unfortunate that the council has ignored most of the elements of this package and has decided in this consultation to simply focus on who the water services team should report to. The way the consultation document is framed, there's only one thing you need to know to make this decision, and that is that the average cost under the 4 is higher in the short term than the average cost under the 1. In taking this approach, the council is ensuring that this water reform will have the highest long-term costs for Kapiti residents. This is because the 4 option is the better cost option for Kapiti residents in the long term. Economies of scale and water supply have been shown to exist internationally, and they exist here. The February 2025 Morrison Lowe report for the Council outlines the size of the gains for residents, and these were confirmed as reasonable by the Council's water expert at the Raumati Beach drop-in session on Friday 28th of March. The Council's claim that this is a more expensive option for Kapiti residents is based on costs being immediately averaged across consumers of all 4 communities. But Morrison Lowe's report in February outlined several scenarios where differential pricing can occur across the 4 participating communities so that Kapiti residents would not have to pay for Palmerston North's or Horowhena's water upgrades. Concerns about Kapiti losing control over water services could be managed through the governance structure of the 4 water entity. But the consultation material contains no information on what governance structures are possible. By choosing the 1 over the 4, this council is choosing to maximise costs for Kapiti residents over the long term. It is not the case that costs for Kapiti residents need to increase now, or that control will be lost. The 4 options should be pursued as the first preference, with the 1 available as a fallback if a satisfactory arrangement for the 4 cannot be agreed. In choosing the 1 option, the Council has decided to make no changes other than those forced upon it by the government. This will be the most expensive way to implement the 1 option that the Council could have chosen. Lower costs for Kapiti residents would occur under the 1 option with 2 changes. First, that volumetric charging is introduced for wastewater as well as freshwater services. This will encourage greater water conservation and delay capital investment, with delays to the associated interest and depreciation costs. 2, that water services be transferred to a council-controlled organisation. While in isolation it might seem as if this is a higher cost option, under the Council's approach to the long-term plan, this would be the lowest cost option for residents. Why is that? Through its long-term plan, the Council has planned to reduce the level of debt on its balance sheet and is increasing rates to do so. But the Council's debt could instead be reduced by transferring water-related debt to the CCO, with that debt already serviced by existing water charges. The Council's own debt burden on its balance sheet is reduced, and the need for rates increases to reduce council debt is eliminated. Overall cost to residents, being a combination of water charges and rates, would be lower as a result. Even then, the cost of the CCO could be reduced by a shared services arrangement between the CCO and KCDC for back office functions. I have previously submitted to you that the Council's debt reduction program through the long-term plan is unnecessary, but you are determined to do it. If you are determined to do it, then transferring water-related debt to a water CCO and by cancelling the rates increases that you have otherwise programmed to repay debt is by far and away the cheapest option for ratepayers to do it. If the Council wishes to confirm its choice to proceed with the 1, it should make those 2 changes: volumetric charging for wastewater and establishment of a council CCO. Those 2 changes will lower cost to Kapiti ratepayers and to residents. Thank you again for the opportunity to speak today.
Thank you. Any questions? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Michael. Excellent submission. In the idea, the presupposition that the 4 is an available option, which it may not be, given some of the meetings that have been had already, like trying to get the 4 to agree looks like a marginal call. So even if KCDC was of a mind to go that way, it doesn't mean the other parties would. So are you appear to have excluded any other possibility, even though they've been presented as options, but any other possibilities, so a 2 or a 3. So is that would you have considered any other options if they were available?
I looked at I looked at assessing the options that were presented in the council's consultation document and did a comparative analysis of those two. I didn't explore whether a 2 or a 3 would be preferable. You know, the information is limited anyway, hard to find anyway, and I don't have the time and resources that your finance team has to do that kind of analysis. Sorry.
Sure, yeah. And just the other one for me is, if we went to the one and it was a CCO and you transferred the debt, and so you're suggesting that you would be volumetric charging for wastewater as well. I don't know how much, and have you, again, you know, you're not employed to do this stuff, so I was just wondering if you'd had any idea about what how that individual house impact might be. And I'm particularly thinking of the really substantial renting market in Kapiti, so they're not actually ratepayers directly.
So by increasing the volume, by including wastewater in the volumetric charge, the level of cost that people would wear, it depends on their water consumption and water usage. How that would then be offset by the reduction in their property rates, because wastewater is currently a charge against your property rates. You can model some scenarios for individual households, but it's pretty much impossible to determine in advance, because it depends on the behavioural response. If you increase the price of water, what would the behavioural response be? All through the consultation, the council has been very clear that the introduction of water meters for fresh water has been incredibly successful, reducing water consumption. I don't know what the elasticity on that happens to be, but it is a perfectly reasonable kind of proposition that increasing, having a pricing water reduces consumption compared to making it free. In which case then I would expect the overall cost to households would drop, but it depends on individual household consumption. And the overall cost to households would drop because the increase in water charges that would face would be more than offset by the property rates that would be reduced. That would be my prior assumption, but it depends on individual household behaviour.
I'm just going to thank you. Very good submission. You enjoyed it.
Councillor Cooper.
Yes, I concur with Nigel's great submission. Just a question in relation to, the premise of going with the 4 is based on that there will be equity within the 4, so that we wouldn't end up, Kapiti residents wouldn't end up subsidising one of the other 3 for the first 10 years.
Yeah, differential pricing, and there are scenarios in the Morrison Lowe report for differential pricing across the 4 contributing communities. The point I raised around about that's a negotiation that would have to be part of a deal, but it seemed to me that would be the first best option for Kapiti residents, is to try to obtain that kind of deal.
But that would need to be done before we committed to the 4, because if that equity deal couldn't be arranged, and if I was another partner, I'd be fighting for the rules to be tipped into me for the first 10 years. So that would need to be done before we committed to the 4, which starts getting pretty technical and time-consuming and almost impossible, I would envisage, to actually do that.
Yeah. So the point of my submission, though, was that I think you should make the effort.
Okay.
It may not be possible to cut a deal. I think your bargaining leverage is improved by actually sort of having as your backstop the 1 option, modified as I have recommended. I think the dynamics, look, I'm not involved in negotiations. I'm not even sure if negotiations are underway. But I doubt that Manawatu residents and Horowhenua residents and their elected representatives want to pay for Palmerston North's upgrade. Nobody wants to pay for everybody else's kind of upgrade. So I think there might actually be an equilibrium there, that everybody accepts that make the change to get the economies of scale, but everybody faces the costs of their communities as they lie. If you can't cut the deal, revert back to the 1. But that's not what your consultation recommended. You said, don't even bother with that, go straight to the 1. And I'm saying I think that's a poor strategy.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you for the time and effort put into that. It's fantastic. Thank you.
I've got a couple of questions before I go on. Actually, I'll do Bede
no,
and then
that's
I'll
right.
go. Bede, you
Okay,
go.
sure. Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, thank you, Michael. I'm just going to note the quality of engagement coming out of Raumati at the moment is quite impressive. So I do have a couple of questions. I guess it's fair to say as you pointed out, the governance model for a 4 option is very uncertain at this stage. So would you agree that that uncertainty makes any forecasting pretty unreliable
Forecasting of what?
for that option? So if we look at the long term, say beyond 10 years.
No, I don't think so. The way that the Morrison Lowe report kind of talks around about where the economies of scale are, they're basically twofold. And again, the water expert at the Raumati drop-in thought that these were kind of pretty reasonable. They're about 13-14%, firstly on purchasing and procurement, second on financing. I don't think they're dependent upon the governance structure of the 4. I think you get that through the economies of scale of teaming together and having that kind of sort of purchasing and borrowing power. The governance structure, I've put a proposition on my submission around about how you might think about the governance structure so that there is equal representation and equal voice around the table. But, I don't know what's possible in that, but that sort of kind of governance arrangement would feel to me at least a reasonable kind of starting point. And none of that should eliminate the opportunity to reach those economies of scale.
Okay, cool, thank you. At the bottom of page 2 and going on to page 3 of your submission, I'll just read it so that we're clear. It says, you refer to kicking the can down the road rather than make the slightly more disruptive but ultimately better choice up front. So when you say better, do you mean cheaper, or are you talking about the quality of the service as well?
So I'm referencing cheaper. I can't see anything in the 4 option that would mean that water service quality should be less. I don't understand why you would get into a situation, particularly with the regulatory regime that the government is going to be imposing, and the regulatory regime, as you've highlighted in the consultation document, is going to be more stringent. I don't see how a 4 governance entity suddenly is let off the hook on those water standards and regulatory kind of requirements. So I'm thinking that the option is neutral in terms of water quality. So it's a cost.
Cool. Useful to clarify that. Just one more question, and I'm sorry that I have to put this on you, but you're kind of the first person in this process. The preference from your view is to go for the 4 based on economies of scale. That seems to be fairly clear. But do you think there's also a risk that we get a situation where we get diseconomies of scale as well?
Through?
Well, where the services themselves become bloated or inflated, or the extension of services lead to further costs?
I think you face that risk no matter which option that you face. Ultimately you can't get around the fact that quality and cost is ultimately kind of determined by your management and kind of governance structures. I don't see that either a CCO, whether it's a single council CCO or a 4 CCO, depending on who you kind of put on your board appointments matter, your management kind of matters. Why that would lead to poorer quality services. The other, and diseconomies of scale. The other thing is that it's still unclear what the Commerce Commission regulatory regime will be, but I think what I have read from the Commerce Commission is that they're probably going to take quite a hands-on involvement to making sure that the promises of efficiency gains through this water reform will actually be realised, but nobody's really clear about actually how that's going to play out yet. But from what I have seen through the Commerce Commission website, I'm anticipating they're probably going to take quite a hands-on role, particularly because, look, you're creating a monopoly, and for those entities for those councils that go to a CCO type model, it's a commercially orientated type monopoly. I think the Commerce Commission will be all over it, to be blunt.
Cool. Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Michael. Cheers.
Yeah, one of my questions has been partially answered. Thanks for the submission. It's absolutely fantastic. So we talk a lot in this process about economies of scale, but I haven't seen compelling evidence that we would achieve them. And you refer in your submission to international and local evidence of economies of scale. Can you give me an example? Can you convince me that they would be achieved? We already do joint procurement, so that's kind of by the by. Are there any other economies of scale that you can identify, and any examples that you could give me?
So in referencing that, I did actually do a Google search of economies of scale in water provision. There are quite a number of scholarly and academic articles around about economies of scale that have been published. I can send them to you, Madam Mayor, if you wish.
Okay, I can Google myself.
I didn't bring them with me. I can't reference them offhand, but it is well known in the literature. I think the issue has been clouded in New Zealand because the previous government's attempt to impose the free water model made outrageous claims around about what the economies of scale would be in the 4 and then the 10 type models, which I think has given a high level of, I think it's kind of muddied the waters in the view around about economies of scale in New Zealand. I think the Castelia report that I think this council had done for local government New Zealand in 2020 successfully debunked the 50% economies of scale that the then government claimed, but they didn't say that there were none. So look, that's about as fulsome as I can get in the circumstances.
No, that's good, thank you. I just wanted to ask about the argument that we should move to a CCO so that we wouldn't have to embark on our debt reduction program.
Yep.
Did you so one of those is that we have one of the reasons we did that is so that we have headroom, but the other reason is to reduce debt servicing costs, and I'm surprised Councillor Wilson didn't ask this because he talks about this a lot. Did you factor that in, the cost of servicing the extra debt if we don't go with our financial strategy?
So you were talking about your plan under the long-term plan?
Yes.
Yeah. So looking at your financial forecast under the long-term plan, you're not going to save a lot of money on your interest costs by year 10 of your long-term plan. I think the differential in interest costs between your debt reduction program and the base scenario of no debt reduction program is about $4 million in 2034. It's $4 million in interest costs. Yeah, I can present those figures to you. I've got a graph at home for that, with that for you, Madam Mayor. The thing that's driving your bills under the long-term plan is not your interest costs. I know everybody talks about interest and debt, but the thing that's really driving your cost, the biggest single cost driver in dollar terms in the long-term plan is your depreciation. That's the single biggest thing that increases the most under your long-term plan. I'd be worried about your capital program and making sure your capital program is fit for purpose, which is why I'm interested then around about charging to delay your capital program until it's necessary to delay the interest and depreciation costs, because by far and away that's the biggest expense increase in the long-term plan. It's not your interest charges. The debt reduction program does not decrease your interest charges very much by year 10 of your long-term plan. It's about $4 million a year.
Right, so we've got the cost of the debt servicing, which isn't so high in your mind. That is a significant figure in mine when we're trying to find savings wherever we can. Then we've got the cost of setting up the CCO. The other suggestion you made was the volumetric charging for waste. did you factor in the cost of the infrastructure that would be required to do that?
So the way I understand that Auckland Water Services does that is they essentially take a multiple of the fresh water or a proportion of your fresh water usage and assume that that will end up going down your waste pipe. So I don't think there's any extra kind of infrastructure kind of required to meter water or to measure water to charge for your wastewater. I think the number I've heard is that 75% of your fresh water ends up going down the wastewater pipe. So you factored into your volumetric charge on the basis of the inflow into the property. I'm not sure what the cost is that you're referring to, Madam Mayor.
Okay, thank you. I do wonder about that with the majority of our water being outdoor use in Kapiti, whether that same scenario would be able to apply.
So whatever the factor is, but I don't think you would. So I would, if your point is that you wouldn't want to have a meter to measure the wastewater going out, I would absolutely agree with you on that. I think you can apply a factor that still nonetheless increases your water charging and nonetheless increases your incentive to conserve water.
Yeah. So the other concern around setting up a CCO or moving water out of the organisation is the potential for loss of local control, and also the concern that came through loud and clear. I remember because I was a submitter from Paikakariki, and one of the main concerns was the potential of privatisation of water. And one thing that happens as soon as we move water out of our direct control is you start to lose that control over the assets and the ownership of the assets. Do you have any thoughts about that?
Yes, I do. Twofold. One, under a CCO, you would appoint the board. Nobody else appoints the board, you would appoint the board. If you're not getting what you want out of the board, you replace the board. So the control actually still sits in this table, even if you've got independence, governance, and directors that are not at this table, but that they're there at your whim and your blessing. The move to privatisation, the government has made it clear and has written into legislation that water assets are not to be privatised whether you use a CCO or not. I think that's a pretty strong signal that a centre-right administration has said that water privatisation is not on the table. I can't imagine a centre-left administration in the future turning around and sort of saying, oh no, let's privatise water. I think you've got a social consensus to say that privatisation is off the table. I do not think that you should be worried about that in making your decision. If a future government in 50 years' time wants to privatise water, they can pass legislation to privatise water, and there's nothing that you or the community will be able to do about it. I do not think it's a factor for this consultation.
That's really good to hear that from you. Thank you. I'll go now to Councillor Coe.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm not particularly well at the moment, but I'll do my best. Michael, I just want to start by thanking you for the quality of your submission. It was very clear and coherent. I have a number of questions for you. So the last time you presented to us was in relation to the ED strategy, and you had some concerns at that time about access to information in a timely manner. I just wondered what your experience has been this time round in terms of obtaining information from council in order to prepare your submission.
Thank you. Probably three things spring to mind. First, I think a number of speakers are going to speak to you today. I don't think this is a very good consultation document. There's too many kind of unanswered questions and missed too much information. I made that in my submission. Point two, having heard from the other people who are going to speak to you today, I think my experience is probably not typical as others. But having said that, the engagement I had with council officers I thought was very good this time round, and quite a significant improvement to my experience under the economic development consultation. I had a number of engagements with Sean Mallon. Yep, very responsive. Commissioned information from Morrison Lowe to answer some of the questions. I thought that was actually quite excellent. And the person at the Raumati Beach drop-in, he was very knowledgeable, very considered. Didn't always back up what you were saying in your consultation document, but I thought he was I thought he was very good. So my experience in those follow-up questions and provision of information was very good. I suspect you'll find other people didn't have the same experience, but mine was very good.
Thanks, Michael. I've got a couple of other questions. You've placed a lot of emphasis on potential cost savings for council over the 20-year period. I'm just a little bit concerned at the level at which you're hanging your hat on those future estimates 20 years hence, because as we know, in the world of economics, a lot can happen between now and 20 years' time. And it just seems to me that this is a case of, like, you know, a bird in the hand's worth two in the bush. We know we've got a very cost-efficient water situation.
So just reminding Councillor that today isn't the day we're debating the decision,
right, yes,
and
I
it's
just
really
want-
important that we don't predetermine ourselves as well. So please just stick to asking questions of the submitters.
Yes, my
Thank you.
question is whether you had considered the risks around those future estimates being way off the mark in reality when we reach that 20-year time frame.
Look, the future is uncertain and very difficult to predict. So what you can, the only thing you can kind of do in situations like this, where you're kind of sort of trying to think of managing a set of assets that are long-lived, 30 to 50 years, is to kind of do your homework, do your research in terms of thinking around about where costs and opportunities kind of lie, examine the evidence around about what are reasonable assumptions to make around those costs and opportunities, and to then kind of apply them to the situation that you've got in front of you. The assumptions that are in the Morrison Lowe material will probably almost certainly be wrong. 20 years out, you know, to sort of say that it's going to be 13% efficiencies on financing is almost certainly wrong. It might be 20, it might be 10, it might be 13 and a half. You know, but the thing that you can say is that based on what we know at the moment, this is a reasonable assumption to apply to this problem and to make conclusions and judgments on it. So Liz, yeah, no, they could be way out. They could be massively underestimating what the size of the gains are, as much as they could be massively overestimating. I do believe, though, that the assumptions that they are making are reasonable and based on evidence.
All right, my third question is, and this has partly been covered, but it's around economies of scale. And if you look at the current situation, where we have, you know, Kapiti seems to be a very efficient provider of water services, it would seem to me that the key success factor for this area is not so much economies of scale, but asset management and forward planning of asset management. I just wondered if you had considered that. You know, it would seem to me that it's of far greater significance than economies of scale, of which you would expect to see that in place now if it was in fact a reality. You know, we're one of the smaller providers. What are your thoughts on that?
I think I would come back to the point that I made in my underpinning submission. I mean, ultimately, what you're kind of relying on there is the quality of governance and management. In terms of the 4 versus the 1, you're making kind of assumptions and choices around about what you think is going to be the quality of management and governance. I don't know why you would think that the quality of management and governance under the 4 would be worse than the quality of management of governance under the 1, whether it's an in-house kind of model or a CCO model under the 1. You get a bunch of poor managers here, you don't do your job properly as governors, and you get terrible results. You know, and we've seen that in other jurisdictions, and some communities actually very close to us have had poor management and poor governance and get terrible kind of results. I'm probably more optimistic than you are, Liz, about saying that a well-constructed governance structure for the 4 should be able to deal with those issues just as much as they can through an in-house model or under a CCO, but put it to the test in the negotiation. If you don't feel satisfied, walk away. But that's not what you're proposing here. You've already, to be blunt, I think you've already decided what you're going to do without testing the market, as it were. And I'm suggesting test the market, see where the efficiencies are there, see where you can get the governance kind of right. If you can't, walk away.
So do you agree then that management is the key to it? Perhaps more so than economies of scale?
Well, management gets you the economies of scale. Economies of scale don't materialise out of thin air. It's because that the kind of the management and governance structures work to identify the opportunities, work hard to deliver on them, work hard to kind of make sure there's accountability and performance on them. Of course, management and governance are the key. Economies of scale don't materialise on their own.
Okay, I'll leave it at that. Thanks very much, Michael.
Thanks, Councillor Coe. Good questions. I think the fact that we're spending over half an hour on questions on this is, hang on, we've got one more, is testament to the fact that we haven't decided what we're going to do yet. Otherwise, I'm sure we have other things we could be doing other than spending half an hour asking questions. Mr. Olsen?
Yeah, thank you, Martin. Yeah, really good submission.
Oh, no, sorry, I've missed Martin. So, Martin, you can go next.
Oh, sorry. No, Martin.
No, Glenn, you go now.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, no, thank you. And I've really enjoyed the questions and everything that's come out of it so far. I got a couple of questions. One for you is, do you think that going with option number 1 now would mean that if the other 3 decided to go together at some time in the future, we couldn't join them if it worked out, and then we could knock on the door and maybe, you know, later on join them and get the benefits of it?
No, it doesn't rule it out, but I would suggest to you that you've got a momentum at this point in time, and everybody is having to make kind of choices and decisions. So everybody's at the same point that you're at, and sort of saying, what's the best thing to do? We need to make this kind of set of decisions now, and I think that the time to work at it is now. If you sort of say, oh, look, we'll kind of leave it for a bit and kind of let's come back to it in 5 years' time, your structures and processes have kind of evolved and changed at that point in time, and what's possible now might not be possible then. If you've got, say, a 2 or a 3 up in Horowhenua, Manatua and Palmerston North, by that point in time, they're on their path, they're on their trajectory. You're coming along and sort of saying, oh, actually, you guys look really good, can we join you? I think that's going to be harder to deliver than doing it now. Not impossible, you know, but it's harder to deliver because the momentum is now, the frameworks and the drive is now. The structures that the government's putting in place is now.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Second one is on the looking at the volumetric charging for wastewater. So there are some, I think, so I am coming from somewhere where I used to live in an area where we had this, and there were some really big issues with this. So I'm not sure how much you've looked at this, but to give you an idea of some of the issues we had, one of them was, of course, where the Mayor said the water.
Sorry, Glenn, in the interest of time, just try and keep it to questions.
This is a question. Yeah, so I'm just asking this has been considered. So one of the problems that they had was, of course, where water is being used outdoor and is not going to the wastewater system. It was very, very unpopular with the residents in those places, with the ratepayers, with the water payers, because they were having to pay for water, wash their car, wash their windows, water there, do all of that. So 2 things happened there. So first thing happened was that the burden was on the resident to prove that they weren't using it, and then they could get a rebate, which caused the problem. And the second thing that happened was water usage went down, but the water usage that went down was not the stuff that was going through waste. So the revenue for freshwater delivery went down. And so at the end of this, what happened was our wastewater bill ended up to be almost 300%, 3 times our freshwater one, because the cost of running the wastewater remained the same, but the amount of water, fresh water, has been used, so that had to go up. Have you looked at that in other regions and how that has affected it?
Look, I haven't looked at what the mechanism for volumetric charging for wastewater. I haven't looked at it in a lot of detail. In the discussion at the Raumahi Beach drop-in, I was talking to the chap Martin Cole, I think his name was at the time. He talked about Auckland Water as being a factor. So I wouldn't try to have separate meters. I would just sort of say, as I mentioned earlier, apply a factor on top of the wastewater to reflect the average proportion going down the wastewater pipe. You would hope that freshwater use would drop. That's the point.
Yeah, thank you. I think we've talked quite a lot about this when it's not a crucial point in the submission, and that's partly my fault. Councillor Halliday?
I shall keep it succinct. And Michael, thank you so much for your patience in answering the questions. I think you've done a fantastic job. My question is based around if we go with the one option, your views on the CCO or going to a CCO model. I'm under the impression that if we move, and we're talking around the $160 million worth of debt that would move to the CCO, we'd be somewhat limited by a debt cap, so to speak. In other words, the ability to borrow in that space. So the borrowing would be based on our turnover in that space, which would be obviously significantly smaller than what it is as part of the current organisation. So say, let's just take a ballpark figure. Say it's $20 million at a 500% borrowing, which we wouldn't have. We'd have 300%. That would then be $100 million, and we've already got $167 million of debt as such. How do you see that we would manage moving forward by having that CCO format in regards to that debt, basically being able to borrow more, shall we say, to keep on top of our growth?
So look, ultimately the amount of debt that goes over to the CCO is a negotiation. The figure of 160 to 167 million has been discussed at length, but to transfer over the kind of the debt and the assets to the CCO, it's a negotiation that goes through. The amount of debt that goes is ultimately kind of part of that discussion. However much debt that goes over, and I understand your point, that comes off the council's balance sheet, gives you more of the headroom that you're looking for under the long-term plan. I mean, I still think you've got plenty of borrowing headroom under the long-term plan anyway, but even if you kind of take 60 million of debt rather than 160 million of debt, that achieves what you're trying to do to the council's balance sheet under the long-term plan. Look, I haven't looked into kind of what the details of the sale and purchase agreement would be between the council and the CCO, sorry.
Oh, that's okay. And I'm under the impression that we don't necessarily have an option. It's either all or nothing. We can't sort of half buy it. That's one of the challenges I have with the CCO, because I appreciate your point of view. And also, the next question was, even if we did do that with the CCO and we brought down the council's debt, at the end of the day, the money's still coming out of the same pocket. And I feel that there's potentially more control in that space. And as you said, we've got the debt head space if it's retained within council being ring fenced rather than the CCO.
Yeah. Yes. So the money is ultimately coming out of the same pocket in terms of kind of ratepayers.
Yes.
Water services. We went through some length with Sean about kind of whether you were kind of fully cost recovered or fully funded, and it turns out you're fully funded, including depreciation and interest costs and your water charges already. So when that debt transfers over to the CCO, we're already paying for that for our water charges. What you're asking us to do, though, under the long-term plan is to increase rates by the time you get into your debt reduction strategy, you're increasing rates by $12 to $15 million a year to reduce debt. So you're already paying for water and the debt on that, and then I think you're doubling up by then increasing rates by $12 to $15 million a year to reduce your debt. I think you can just do it in one, and you don't have to increase rates to do it.
Right, okay, thank you.
Right, thank you, Michael. That's been a marathon.
It has.
Well done.
So
So
thank
your
you for your
microphone's
time.
facing in the other direction. I can't see it, Councillor Warwick, and we've kind of run out of time. Can you take one more question? Sorry. Just try and have your microphone straight so that I can see them, because I'm not watching the screen. Thank
Like
you.
that?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So just a quick question, 2 questions in one kind of sentence, if that's okay. Have you considered the position of the other 4? Because it seems that 2 of us are in a good position, infrastructure-wise, and 2 are not. So the position of the other one that is in a good position could be to not go with the 4, which would leave us assisting the massive infrastructure deficit for 2.
So,
Yeah.
Councillor Warwick, I actually think that's asked and answered within
Okay.
the submission. I'm happy to go through that with you afterwards, rather than Michael having to reiterate what's in his submission. It's to do with the price harmonisation, whereby we don't pay. We have a governance structure where we organise the payment so that doesn't happen. I think that's quite clear. Thanks, Michael. And just to save some time. So I'll just check in because we're running rather late now. Is there anybody in any of the submitters that need to get away at a particular time? Because I can shuffle around the order if anybody has any other commitments. Just checking in because I don't want anybody to miss out. Okay, we'll go with the order we have here then. So next we have Chris Harwood.
I'm good. Thank you for the opportunity to talk with you this morning. I do not want to be here for half an hour. I'm just going to put that on the table to start with. But I do applaud your engagement with the previous submitter. It really shows that you are now starting to really consider the options that are in front of you. So thank you for that. I'm speaking on behalf of the concerned ratepayers Kapiti. As a group, we have fully engaged in the consultation process. We've attended drop-in sessions, the webinar that was held. We've raised questions, multiple questions of KCDC staff and councillors, and held 2 public meetings to promote the engagement in the consultation process and to hear the concerns of ratepayers. We'd like to acknowledge the efforts that council staff have made to answer some of our more detailed questions. And we're heartened to note that our questions have resulted in more information being made available to Kapiti residents via the FAQs on the website. So thank you for that. But we have submitted that we are still not in a position to fully support either option 1 or option 2, as we still do not have sufficient information on which to make a recommendation. We're not clear about which of the 2 options is the most effective or efficient option for a Kapiti Water Services organisation that will take us forward several decades to come. We're of the view that the consultation document itself and the answers provided to our questions are at best generic statements with little supporting analysis or detail. We remain unsure of how cost estimates have been arrived at, what is included and what is not. We contend that the process has been heavily slanted towards residents approving the preferred KCDC option and is silent on analysis of key information, such as that provided by Morrison Lowe in their February report. And we don't think it's good enough. As stated in Mayor Holborough's introduction in the consultation document, this is one of the most important decisions we'll make in coming decades. She also states that it's complex, that there are many unknowns, that financial decisions require many assumptions that may or may not play out, and we've had that questioned just previously. She further states that current arrangements have served us well and that we see no need to make changes, at least in the short to medium term. The concerned ratepayers Kapiti group contends that while some aspects of the current water services arrangements may have served us well in the past, and that we are indeed better positioned than some other districts because of the significant investment in water meters, we are entering a time of change. We will have new expectations about water quality, new expectations about how water services should be planned and funded, and new expectations about matters such as ensuring that all revenue collection, debt repayment, infrastructure, and operational costs are ring-fenced. And there'll be greater external scrutiny over how any water services entity, whether in-house, a separate council-controlled organisation, a CCO, actually delivers for its ratepayers. The information provided through the consultation does not adequately address what is going to change, how these changes will be managed, and when the changes will be implemented for either option. I spent some time reviewing the YouTube recording of the briefing to elected council members about the Local Water Done Well submissions that was held on the 15th of April. And I was alarmed at two levels. Firstly, council staff glossed over some of the detailed questions posed by councillors. Interestingly, some of the very same questions being asked by the concerned ratepayers Kapiti and ratepayers who attended meetings. At that meeting, council staff spent some time explaining to elected members how water charges were currently applied. This was not explained in the consultation document or FAQs, and council staff stated that this would be made clearer in the long-term plan. It was stated that it was not possible to do detailed cost estimates for each kind of water user across the district, so they could understand what the changes might mean. We accept that, but it would have been possible to do some differentiated scenario modelling. An elected member asked why the long-term plan locked in a 17% rate rise ahead of the Local Water Done Well decisions. It seems that this was closely related to KCDC's overall debt reduction strategy. I'm not going to speak to you more about that because I think you've heard about that previously from Michael. But the consultation document and responses to questions we have received do not outline the potential impact of savings that would result in possible changes to Casey's debt repayment program. And one of the council staff at the meeting said that we've had no direction from central government about debt reduction. Surely that's a matter for KCDC to consult on with respect to water services, not a central government directive. KCDC seems to have taken a fait accompli approach to this consultation. Our submission has detailed questions and comments because we were unable to get the detailed information we'd expect for such an important decision. Which leads me to the second alarm. It was stated during the briefing meeting that possible changes were complicated if you dig into the detail, and that's why we've gone with option one. That we're building the plane while we're flying it. And council has not done the level of work required to consider the price harmonisation options proposed by the February Morrison-Lowe report. It was further stated in that meeting that work on a water services delivery plan is 30 to 40% underway. How can that be? We don't have a decision about what option will be progressed. And then to cap things off, a level of coercion was introduced by somebody telling everyone to vote wisely. Concerned ratepayers wrote to Mayor Holborough on April the 6th this year to request an extension to the consultation period. In her response, the Mayor stated that no decisions had been made about the delivery model or the need for a referendum, and our request was declined. So in conclusion, we contend that KCDC has not conducted an effective consultation process and that the process to date has been heavily slanted towards the Council's preferred option. We ask elected members to demand and engage with the detail. This decision is too important to leave to chance. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I'm just going to ask about the statement that you have only received vague and generic replies to your questions. So at the beginning of April, you received a letter from Mr. Mellon, and I've just pulled it up. It's 2,000 words. What was missing? What kind of detail did you not receive? A lot of what you're talking about might be part of a water services delivery plan rather than this stage of the consultation. And did you think about where we're at in the process and what might be further down the track in terms of a water services delivery plan, which is the next stage in the process?
I think one of the things that's been apparent is that there is work going on, but we're not privy to what is being discussed, thought through, how that might work, and we're left trying to make a recommendation to you without detailed information on which to work through with around that. So if a water services delivery plan is underway, presumably there's a whole bunch of assumptions and detailed information that would have been able to be shared with ratepayers about what's going to change, how will this work, what charges will happen when, what are the assumptions that you're actually working to. None of that is available to us. We're just told there are assumptions, we've done some work, kind of trust us.
So did you look at the level of detail that was supplied elsewhere in the country in terms of where we're at in the process? I'm just aware that we're at a certain stage. A lot of what we're talking about is information that'll be available once we get further down the track of water services delivery plans. No council in the country has yet released a water services delivery plan, and they're some months away. So in order to create the water services delivery plan, you first need to create the structure. So in a way, it's a little bit horses and carts. I'm just wondering whether your organisation thought about what kind of work would be done at what stage in the process.
I think we expected much more detailed work about both of the options at the front end of this. We're being asked to recommend to you what we think about the best option to go forward with without having that level of information and assumption and detail on which to base that recommendation to you. Frankly, I have looked at what's available in other areas. It is scarce. I'm worried that other jurisdictions and other districts are making decisions like us with you with incomplete information on which to base those recommendations. And I'm most concerned about what's happening here.
So if it's a concern that you think is a nationwide problem, have you written to the Minister?
No.
Maybe
I'm
that might
talking
be a
with
good
you
idea.
about the information that we should have had access to in order to give to you some recommendations about what we think might be the best option for Kapiti ratepayers.
Yeah, I certainly hear you, and I think it's potentially a problem with the process rather than a problem with our particular consultation. I'll go to Councillor Wilson now.
Yeah, thanks for your submission, Chris. It's just a couple of things that I would note. And thank you that you've checked out some of the other documents. We attended a meeting in Levin where there were 4 councils were there, and I'm with you. The documents are just what they are, but the Kapiti document is probably as good, if not better, than most that I've seen. And I think it's partly a consequence of the timing, that this is a government thing. The idea that we're building the plane while we're flying it is partly due to the fact that we're still waiting for government legislation that hasn't come through that will impact this process. We're being asked to make decisions all around the country, being asked to make decisions in the absence of concrete legislation. So that's in itself is a tricky thing. I just wondered also, there was in terms of the options, if your organisation was asked to pick one, do you think you would be able to do that? If you had a choice between the 4 and the 1, if that was the only choices that were there, would you have a preference on that?
Right now, no, because we have not got enough information on which to make a balanced decision. Can I just say that While the final government, part 3 of the water bill, whatever it's called, hasn't yet passed through the whole process, it's a pretty good steer on what you are facing into as a council around what the regulatory framework will actually be. And in that regulatory framework, as I understand it, there's an option for councils to seek an extension on the timeframe for the delivery of a water services delivery plan, which probably shouldn't be done in any great detail until a full decision is made. And I know it's chicken and egg, but there is an option for council to actually say, hang on a minute, in order to do full and free and clear consultation with our community, we are seeking to delay the delivery of that plan. That option seems to be available.
And just one other quick observation.
Question, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
all my observations. You respond to it. At the meeting that was held in Palmerston North, what seemed pretty clear, this was of the 4, what seemed pretty clear is that 2 of the 4 didn't want to be part of the 4. And these various iterations, what has become clear to me anyway, is that whatever options you put up, it's still going to be a bit of a circus. There didn't seem to be anything, and there's another meeting next week where there's going to be seven entities getting together. I think they're all councils getting together again to discuss this. So I think everybody is in a similar situation to ourselves. But I'll just say thank you for the degree of detail in your submission as well. Whether people agree with it or don't agree with it, it's really important to get this kind of feedback and information. So thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry, I do have Councillor Coe online.
Oh, thank you. Me again with my croaky voice. Look, Chris, I think you make a really good point around a sort of a philosophical issue, and that is the extent to which the community should be able to rely on elected members to make decisions on their behalf, and the extent to which the community needs to see every bit of detail in relation to decisions. And I think this is something, I just wonder whether you think this is something we should explore further in terms of when we go up to consultation. You know, are we saying, look, here's the evidence that we've done our homework, and are you happy that we've covered off all the key things in terms of the process as opposed to the detail? It seems to me that this is quite a sticking point in terms of the operation of democracy, shall we say, in the sense that, you know, elected members are put forward as representatives of the community to make decisions on their behalf. To what extent do we allow that to happen versus the community wanting to know every little bit of detail? And I think there's somewhere in there may be a balancing point, but you know, I guess, you know, it would be good to explore how we can reach the right balance on that issue, and how we can make information available to people who want to know the detail. I just wonder if you have any thoughts on that.
I certainly do. The business of council is to support a democratic process. You are absolutely right. The Concerned Ratepayers does not want to be involved in the decisions around whether you buy this brand of coffee or that brand of coffee for your council meetings. However, if council comes out to consult on a major issue that has the potential to have impact on generations to come, then we would expect a full consultation, not an information drop of the things that you choose to tell us. We would like to be fully engaged in a consultation process where we can discuss things in some detail to assure ourselves that the decisions that we then trust you to make have been fully considered. At this point in time, it does not feel like that. We are being informed rather than consulted.
Any further questions, Councillor Coe?
No, I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I will point out that the public had access to all the information that elected members had access to. So just to make that clear. Thank you, Chris. And thank you for the meetings that you held. Really fantastic. Yeah.
If I could just finish then, we do understand that in some of the districts where the 4 are, they actually had the councils themselves held public meetings, not their concerned ratepayers group, and that might have been a really good thing to do rather than have drop-in sessions.
Yeah, thank you for that feedback. Catherine Ennis.
Thank you, Mayor Holborough and councillors, for the opportunity to speak to you. We do appreciate that. And as you can tell, a number of us have put quite a lot of effort into analysing the consultation document. I just want to start by making a general introduction. I have a background of about 40 years. My entire professional career has been in and around government, either as a public servant or later as a consultant to government. I was part of the consulting team 20 years ago who worked with the Department of Internal Affairs on the review and development of the 2002 Local Government Act. I was a consultant to Local Government New Zealand for 3 years, and in the last 20 odd years I've been working internationally. I have advised as a governance advisor and public management consultant. I've advised about 15 different governments around the world. So I want to start by making an initial acknowledgement that we do understand very well that local water done well has been imposed by central government, and that the council is required to implement this whole new framework for water services. And we do understand that the way that the government is rolling out the legislation has created quite some difficulty for you, not only in the timeframes imposed, but in the way that the preliminary arrangements legislation was enacted last year, but you're having to develop your water services delivery plan to a fairly narrow timetable by early September in advance of the actual water services legislation, which is still going through its parliamentary process. So I do want to acknowledge that we do have some sympathy for the council and what you're having to deal with. But I'm afraid that what I'm going to focus on, there are people who have submitted before me and who will come after me who have a lot more expertise about the financial management and technical aspects of this implementation than I do. So I'm going to concentrate on the consultation process and the engagement with the community. So acknowledging that you are under some difficulties in reacting to this central government reform is, I'm afraid, the extent of my sympathy for council at the moment, because we do not believe that this has been a consultation in good faith, and I share the views of previous submitters that your consultation document is, in my view, a poor document. So I want to make some general points about consultation generally and the consultation documents that Council has been publishing. So we're seeing a pattern of very general statements and rhetoric. We're seeing a pattern of directed consultation. So we're experiencing surveys and portals that are designed to corral the public into voting for the option that council prefers. and is accompanied by a lack of detailed information. It's coming across to the community as a box-ticking approach to the consultation exercises, where council is hiding behind websites. And I'm sure it doesn't feel that way to you, because I'm sure that you think you're engaging with the public. But this is the way that it is coming across to the public. And if I was engaged to consult to you as a governance advisor, I would be telling you that you are endangering the relationship with your community in the way that you are carrying out consultation. So, as an example, in the Local Water Done Well consultation document, the council has not provided information on some things like how water services are currently funded and what is the ratio of funding currently raised through water charges and rates. How might that change under Local Water Done Well and why? Does an in-house unit meet the definition of a water organisation under the Act, which, according to page 13 of your consultation document, suggests has to have a board? Why would the status quo option suddenly cost an extra 1.4 million per year? And you have said in your consultation document that around 300,000 is expected in the form of new government levies, but what is the rest of that 1.4 million for? And there's been a lot of discussion already about the two options. So the way that you have presented those two options doesn't really allow the community to in fact make a decision at all, because there isn't really enough information. And in particular, the 4 reads like a presentation of a kind of a straw man option that you're putting up, because it isn't really at this stage an option at all, because you have not done the work to demonstrate to the public that it is in fact a viable option that they can consider. So the council hasn't done the work to make it so. You haven't got an agreement with the 3 other councils, so it's not clear whether in fact there is such a thing as a 4 council option. The potential economics of scale are not properly investigated or estimated. Options for price smoothing, which might avoid something that the public would be concerned about, which is obviously subsidising other councils, doesn't appear to have been calculated or investigated. So it's not really an option at all. It is in fact just an idea at this stage, and probably it's an option that you've now ensured will not be further investigated, because you've put it out to the public in a form in which it is likely to get shot down, because, as you know, the community is concerned primarily about ownership and also subsidisation of other councils. I was at 2 public meetings recently where I was taken by 2 statements, one from the Chief Executive, Mr. Edwards, and one from Sean Mallon, the Group Manager for Infrastructure. Mr. Edwards basically produced the argument which is in the consultation document, which has a flavour of "trust us, we know what we're doing." And at that meeting, Mr. Edwards almost said that verbatim. And Sean Mallon stated that, oh, well, the government will probably change next year anyway, and then we'll be back to considering other options and what we were doing before. I have to say that in response to that first statement about trust us, we know what we're doing, it's difficult, Mr. Edwards, to have confidence in the council that you do know what you're doing when your own annual reports indicate that you're presiding over a bureaucracy which is turning in some fairly low levels of performance achievement. There are parts of your organisation which are only achieving 33% of their achievement targets, and they've been doing that consistently for the last 3 years. Another unit within your council is achieving zero performance achievement.
We've kind of got off topic here. We have got coming up at one of our meetings. We do have our regular report back. I think it happens 3 times a year. So feel free to come along to public speaking and express these concerns at that stage. That would be really great, actually.
What the public is seeing, though, is that there are increases in the level of staffing for the bureaucracy, and we're not seeing a corresponding level of performance achievement. Some parts of your council are consistent.
I'll say again, we're here to talk about future water service delivery. I'd ask the submitter to please stick to the topic. Thank you. We do want to hear these thoughts, but now is not the time, particularly as we're running behind. Thank you.
The consultation document doesn't give enough information for the community to feel that it can actually confidently assess and make decisions. We would have expected to see at least a summary of pros and cons for each option. We would have expected to see that if there was going to be put up an option which depended on an agreement with other councils, that your progress in those discussions and liaison with other councils would have been presented, and that a summary cost-benefit analysis would have been presented in that consultation document. So all of that was missing. And again, concluding as a governance advisor, it makes me really sad to see the way that you've handled this consultation, because I do believe that Mayor Holborough and your councillors and your staff, that the council is full of good people with good intentions who want to do a good job. And I'm trying to suggest to you that by undertaking the kind of consultation that you've done for Local Water Done Well, you're torpedoing the relationship with the very people who you need to have confidence in, and who, by the way, are your paymasters. If I was wanting to be re-elected as a councillor and wanted to get to make a return to a seat which, by the way, has not grown roots of entitlement while you've been sitting on it, I would be concerned about the reaction of community. And again, your own reports indicate that less than 50% of the community have confidence in council decision making and in overall value for money satisfaction.
Do you have any further comments about the water services?
No, I'm
proposals?
I'm finishing there, thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Where are we? Councillor Wilson.
Yep, I just would make the comment that the change of government sounds more like me than Sean. So he might have been misquoted there. It could have been me who said that. I just wondered, so given where we are at, a preferred option, do you think you are in a position to have a preferred option?
No, not on the evidence that's been given. I would, on the evidence that you've put forward, perhaps lean towards retaining a in-house option at this stage, but I don't think you've put that fairly to the public and being able to actually rule out the 4 option or any other option that might have been presented. And I would go back to the point that the previous submitter mentioned that Concerned Ratepayers Capity had suggested that you extend the period for consultation. We do understand that you're operating within a very narrow time frame to get that service delivery plan by the 3rd of September. However, you have made a point of stating that this experience is happening to councils all over the country. And as a previous advisor to Local Government New Zealand, you do have the opportunity to lobby Local Government New Zealand and to lobby the government yourselves for an extension to that period on the basis of the kind of feedback that we've been providing from the community.
Any further questions? I'm not seeing any. Thank you very much for your presentation today.
Thank you.
Donald Carter.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to speak with you today. Just lost the glasses. Yeah, I've actually expanded on my original submission, and so I'll actually start off. I think you've actually been given another copy, so I'll start on paragraph 2. The council has produced a Water Done Well consultation document dated March 2025. The document is very superficial and lacks clarity, bearing in mind that 6 months has elapsed since the Act was passed. In that document, Council presented 2 options, the status quo, keep in-house, and the 4 combined with Horowhenua, Palmerston North, Manawatu and Kapiti subject to mutual agreement. There are, of course, other options. There's the 2 and the 3. Having discounted Wellington due to its well publicised issues with its water-related infrastructure. In discussing the 4, there is no reference to any agreement with the other parties in the document, even though it's been 6 months since the legislation passed. I therefore presume that there is little or no discussion with the other 3 parties of the 4, and the financial projections in the report are little more than speculation. What is clear is that the council clearly favours the current in-house management of water services. However, there is some confusion. The document states that that councils can continue to directly provide water services in-house, but with changes to meet the legislation. Does that mean that the services are provided by a business unit within council, the current situation, as I understand it? Or does the current infrastructure unit have to become a limited liability company with shareholders and all the associated governance costs? It's on page 7 of the document. This legislation currently provides protection from privatisation at the moment. However, this does not provide protection for the future on this issue, and if a business unit has become a limited liability company, it's saleable, albeit with the necessary change in legislation. The legislation provides for water services revenue to be ring-fenced and may only be spent on water services. I support the proposal to keep water services in Kapiti and in public ownership. A serious question arises, and it is not clearly stated in the document: what will the general rate reduction be with water services removed from the annual rates bill? What extra can water users expect to pay for these services once they are ring-fenced? Will there be a general increase or decrease in the annual fixed payments to council water supply? Currently, those customers who are on the council operated reticulated supply are charged a consumption fee per litre used as recorded by meter. What does this fee cover? Water supply involves extraction, treatment, quality monitoring and reticulation of water. The cost of infrastructure and the debt incurred to build and maintain that infrastructure. Its depreciation replacement cost and the cost of borrowing. Is this to be covered by the volumetric charge? If not, how will these costs be identified to avoid cross-subsidisation with other water services? How will these costs be ring-fenced and clearly identified? Service recipients need to know what they're paying for. I understand, by all accounts, Kapidi's water supply services are in good shape. Wastewater, similar to the above, that's in terms of the treatment, quality monitoring and all the other, and the pipes and things. Ratepayers are connected to the services and includes trade waste connections. There is no reference in the document as to how these services are charged. I presume the trade waste to sewer are charged based on acceptance criteria and the treatability and is independently monitored. There should be no charge for wastewater where wastewater services are not provided. That is, in the rural areas and in settlements without reticulation. Recovery of costs with respect to wastewater treatment is not discussed in the document and therefore not transparent. I am familiar with the Watercare's charging practice. It has been determined that 75% of the water recorded as taken from the reticulation finds its way into the sewage treatment system. The costs associated with the collection, treatment, infrastructural costs and depreciation are levied to the customer. And referring to the question that one of your councillors asked in terms of Nelson, what Auckland actually has done is it actively encouraged people to actually install roof collection systems for their non-potable use, and people could actually use that to wash their cars and water their gardens and that kind of thing in terms of overall water use. I do note that Kapiti does, this council actually does provide a service by providing tanks for that service. I think they're 200 litre plastic tanks that people can use as an auxiliary non-potable supply. Stormwater. I understand that stormwater services are covered entirely by the general rate. Charging for these services should be transparent and based on the benefit on a catchment basis. The document states that council has 18 pump stations. These of necessity will have defined catchment areas, and the consumers who benefit should be level the cost of the service and the infrastructure that is necessary to provide that service. Similarly, the council has soak pits, ponds, wetlands, all of which require some level of maintenance, and their catchment is easily defined, and the service they provide should be levied to the beneficiaries. Perhaps the most contentious is the stormwater management of the 52.7 kilometres of open waterways that provide stormwater drainage. I've heard many instances of local flooding and water retention due to the apparent lack of maintenance by council. There needs to be a clear definition of those waterways on a catchment basis and identify those catchments council is responsible for as part of the stormwater reticulation provided under local water done well. I just add in there that there seems to be a lot of duck shoving when it comes to maintenance of drains and those waterways which are an essential part of the stormwater system. There have been cases where, no, that's the regional council, no, that's the Kapiti District Council, and it goes backwards and forwards. Nothing happens until the individual hires a digger, cleans the drain out, and then gets sanctioned for actually maintaining their property. I understand the ramifications that we go that later. There is a need for clear classification of benefits for stormwater system managed by council. That classification would clearly define areas of benefit which would be levied according to the service required and delivered. This practice is widely used in urban and rural river control and flood management schemes. The last item is the new levies. On page 30, there's a table that states the additional operating costs for council to continue as usual. The one is 1.4 million. On page 31, it states that the new levies, this is the government levies, total 303,000. What's the other 1.097 million for? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wilson.
Thank you very much, Donald. I just wondering, you being in Te Horo, looking at the options beyond the one, because the one you're dealing with a lot of the questions that the one would be dealing with, but with the four, have you given any thought to what the impact of that might be on rural delivery and quality and cost?
Only superficially, because it isn't covered in the report, but basically with larger entities, it means that they're actually more remote from the public and even less happens than happens now.
Yeah, okay. And I would just say I've taken on board, because you've said it and others have, and getting some clarity about the 1.097 million and what that goes to. I'm sure it goes to the appropriate things, but I'm like you, it'd be quite handy to know what that is, and yeah.
Yeah. I just might add that before the Resource Management Act came in, there were local drainage boards, there were a lot of entities around that had specific tasks. When those were amalgamated into district and regional councils, a lot of the services dropped off, and certainly after 10 years, there was a lot of dissatisfaction about the remoteness of A, the elected members, and B, the services that are being provided with no reduction in costs to the ratepayer.
Great, thank you.
Just might add one other thing. There was a question about how do you proportion the wastewater for sewage charges. That's not hard to do. You know how much water is actually being used, the wastewater treatment plant, and at various other locations you can measure the flow. That's how Auckland got it 75%.
There's a couple more questions. Councillor Kirby, the Deputy Mayor.
Thanks, Donald. I appreciate the time you've put into writing this and then presenting it for us. Just one question. Are you advocating for council to consider charging for stormwater according to which area of Kapiti you live in and the benefits or the services that are provided in each of those parts of our district?
Yes, I don't believe that an area which is serviced by a flood pump should be subsidised by those who don't need it.
Okay, that's an interesting point of view that I've not heard anyone else present in terms of specifically starting to charge for stormwater according to area. So thanks for that.
It's actually included in the general rate in terms of stormwater, I understand. So
we've all got a general rate for stormwater. Yeah, that's right. And same for wastewater. Is a general.
Us in Pyral, I know there's a specific levy there for flood because it's in a basin and they have a flood pump. It's not the only place either. Ngatea has them. We go to lots of locations, which I'm very familiar with.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Bede.
Thank you. So just one question. Your submission, you have a preference for the option 1. So, and I notice you rank public ownership as your number 1 priority, which you've confirmed with your submission. So in your view, is that need for public ownership, does that overcome any benefits that come from, say, efficiencies of scale or other benefits that are seen in the 4 option?
Those presumed in the 4 option on the basis of the information given is spurious. And my experience from Welsh Water and Scottish Water, when I actually visited those sites, albeit some time ago, was that they actually decided to do their own thing on the basis that what happened in London and Birmingham and Manchester was an absolute disaster, because eventually their water supplies actually got sold to the French, and they didn't know how to manage the water, and there was all sorts of, it took something like 10 years for it to all settle down again. So I think in representation and local management is and I don't believe ultimately in economy of scale. Just look how much you're paying for your power now.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Oh, Councillor Cooper.
Yes, it just seems to me, listening to the submitters today, and I'm sure the submitters that will come later, a lot of the questions or lack of information is actually detail that will be in a water services delivery plan. So the question I think for me is, thinking about it, is the water service delivery plan, what entity is the best entity to deliver that plan? So if you think logically around it, should the water service delivery plan actually drive the entity that we end up creating or going with? So should the water service delivery plan actually be part of the consultation, do you think?
I don't know exactly what it has to be included in a water services delivery plan. You've only got until September to produce it. And the only option that seems to be favoured by council is the local option. If there was an extension of time and you could come to agreement with the other parties, well, that would change the colour of the whole scenario. But I do favour the local management. So
yep. That's a question I'll ask later as well, I think, because the questions, the information that seems to be missing out of the consultation is actually questions that can only be answered by a water service delivery plan, by the entity that's subsequently created.
I'm not sure that's the case. I think your engineering and your water supply staff could actually do that right now.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Donald.
Thank you.
Jeffrey. When you're ready.
Sure. Kia ora, ngā Kanihea. This submission is by myself and my wife, who unfortunately had to go to another meeting today. We have 2 primary concerns. One, and which has been mentioned already by other submitters, is the lack of explanation in the document as to why the cost of the 3 waters in the standalone option designated as the 1 is stated to be increasing by 1.4 million, and we believe we are entitled to an explanation. This amount is not insignificant. There needs to be full transparency about who is going to be paid more than is the case currently. Only one charge from the government is mentioned of $230,000. What else is envisaged? A company or water board with directors' fees, payments to the usual consultants, including lawyers, or both. Secondly, this is the controversial matter of the water meters that were installed during the Rowan and Church mayoralties, which, according to polls taken at the time, 70% of ratepayer citizens did not want, and are said to have cost over $20 million, including the cost of the ones that were installed or have been installed since the initial installation in 2013-2014. Water meters are supposed to have a service life of about 15 to 20 years normally. If you put that question into a search engine like Google, that is the result that comes up. But we were told at the time that the Kapiti meters were installed, that because of the amount of salt in the ground in much of Kapiti, that longevity is much less, around 10 years, and that 10 years is up. We believe that KCDC needs to take the sensible decision to avoid another $20 million minimum, probably 30 million, allowing for inflation, and disestablish the water meters once they have come to the end of their useful lives, and thus avoid another massive cost of $30 million, which I believe is simply not allowed for in any kind of planning, which I've seen in documents generally. Now, I'm well aware of the arguments against doing that. People claim that the meters have helped identify leaks. However, after 10 years, I think it is very likely that most of the significant leaky freshwater pipes have been identified. Kapiti is also in a high rainfall area, and the only dry period when people use more than normal is in the warm summer months between January and March. On our e-zine, Waikanae Watch, we have regularly published rainfall statistics for the last 10 years, as recorded at the Waikanae Water Treatment Plant. Last year's rainfall for Kapiti was 1.2 metres, which means that on every square metre of land, 1.2 cubic metres of rainfall fell. That figure is actually close to the long-term average. But let's be pessimistic and say that it's only 1 metre of rain that will fall from now on. And there's no reason to believe that it will be the case, but let's just be pessimistic. That means that on every square metre of land, 1,000 litres of water falls a year. Multiplied by the land area of the Kapiti coast, which is stated as being 731.5 square kilometres, then that is a massive amount of fresh water which we get. Each of those square kilometres is 1 million square metres. I will let you do the math. Many people installed their own storage tanks following the installation of the council water meters, and I believe that the council itself was selling them at one stage. In our property, we installed 2 800-litre tanks for water use on the garden during the dry summer months. And one advantage of that, of course, is that the water is unchlorinated, which plants prefer, as do people, by the way. But again, this is an issue where nothing has been mentioned on any documents, and we simply don't know. As you can gather, I am extremely critical of the water meters generally, and I would like to see them gone. It seems to us that the document that we were presented to, as a consultation document only covered the bare minimum that the central government expected to be mentioned and no more.
Oh, you're done. Great. Any questions? Councillor Wilson.
You appear to be, thank you, Jeffrey, for your submission. You appear to sound like an advocate for a dam. Oh, you are?
Exactly, and that's exactly what should have been done back in 2012, 2013. That was a sensible decision, and it is still a sensible decision.
Thank you. Let the record show. Very wise words, Mr.
I
Chairman.
seem to recall we already had a consultation around that some years ago. Yeah. Any further questions? Thank you for your submission today.
Thank you.
Good to see you. Martin Freudenstein? Not here? He doesn't see, I didn't see him. So John Andrews is our last submitter.
Good morning.
Just before you start, I'll just warn everybody that under standing orders, if we keep going without a break after 1:45, we'll just have to move a quick motion. So just letting you know, so I don't interrupt later.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak, Mayor and councillors. Yeah, sorry, I enjoyed the last submission. It was good. If I can quickly answer one of your questions, Mayor Holbert, please. you asked about international economies of scale models. The two best ones that I know of were Scottish Water and the Tasmanian model. Okay, so I can send that to you later if you wish. Okay, I wasn't going to speak to my original written submission because this has been a long, very frustrating process. For the simple reason that the executive still refused to provide answers to my questions or sound financial advice or reasoning with which the public can actually make these submissions to you. And please, it appears that this consultation has been another example of a PR sham, and I'm sorry to have to say that, but that's how it comes across from the way the document was written and the way people have responded about it. I was going to say KCD seems to have a modus operandi of listen and take no notice. Now, you have been taking notice today, so please, I thank you for that, and that I do appreciate that. Okay, so please, long may it continue. And I'm not going to address the executive because, for the reasons I've said, I'm addressing you councillors because, please, as a plea for you, please, to obtain this financial advice and background, the real background that you should have been provided with in order for you to make the decision, okay? We don't even get a chance. We never got the chance to get that information. We're still being denied it, as I'll come through and explain. So I'm asking you guys to please act for us and get this detail, because if you don't, as you've already heard, this water services model will have difficulties, major difficulties. So I'm sorry, but I have no confidence in the current executive to provide comprehensive, transparent and an equitable consultation based on the past history of, I'm sorry, but there's been a lot of misrepresentations. For these reasons, the most recent document, Morrison Load document, was not presented to the ratepayers, and it was full of mistakes and omissions which the executive still refused to correct. We are fully aware of the tricks that the KCDC executive deflect and refuse to completely answer OIRs fully or simply omit answering at all. And when the questions are repeated, which I've had to do, as you know, the executive issue new multiple generations of OIRs and continually delay answering. So please, are these just tricks to hide the information, to not provide transparency? I'll leave that for you to decide. Council has refused multiple times to disclose the water services specific revaluations. There was a recent OIR 1326 and 1341. Council does not take out loans for specific projects. This is in relation to the debt of the water services assets. And clearly the way that the long-term plan was constructed and the way that this crude model has been put forward is to create a large debt headroom for the main council infrastructure, okay? That's very clear to me, and I hope it's clear to you too. Council still refuses to verify what portions of that 385 million of loan debt is for Three Waters, what it's actually for, and what is actually secured over. And then you claim, the executive claim, that 68% of all council debt is for Three Waters assets without providing evidence. Okay, this is pretty critical. Now, you refuse to provide this advice, but I can assure you that the Commerce Commission will be breathing down your neck very soon about this, okay? I can assure you, please. The OIR, an OIR has been requested 3 times. If the net water services CapEx GST claim per annum does not reconcile with the yearly additions in the water services assets portfolio, you've got an issue, okay? In my job, I've always learned to read in the dark spaces and read between the lines and read what you're not disclosing, okay, please. And I would sincerely hope the KCDs are not capitalising operating cost expenditures. I sincerely hope that's not happening. But if it is, then it's double dipping and it's designed to inflate the uptake on debt. Okay. No, I think the executive will continue to deny this information. But as I've alluded to earlier, there were two major government agencies appointed under this new bill, which have our back. That's the biggest plus that I can see in this new legislation. So where we've had to fight individually on our own one-to-one, which has been difficult for all of us, as you know, and I've had a long 20 years history of this. That's why that was so big. They will not let you eat your cake and eat it too, okay, at the expense of the ratepayers. Because this new bill does have major protections for us, and I will ensure that that happens, and I can assure you that a lot of others will too. When I was doing the research for this, I was actually surprised for local water one down, well, looking at the figures, only 21% of all your rating levy income is spent on core services, only 21%. That's roading and Three Waters, okay? That's page 114 of the last year's long-term plan, annual report. But the Three Waters operating expenditure only represents 12.1% of that 24 million. That's only 12% of your operating expenditure. 12%. It's tiny. So where is the other 80% going? Does it doesn't mean that 80% of all revenue is being spent on a bloated KCD governance bureaucracy. And as you know, regulatory services, commercial and consents and all that kind of stuff is user pays, or should be, developer levies, etc. So there's a big black hole here, which I know you've got interest on debt and that kind of stuff, but that's 80% of your revenue. You know, where's it going? And how do you account for that? How do you justify how you're spending that if that's what the figures say? And they're all there. I didn't publish this in the...
Could you explain how that's relevant to water services delivery? I've lost the thread. Sorry. I shouldn't have to.
Is that working? Yeah, okay. Well, exactly that. It's what I'm trying to say. The point I'm trying to make is that only 12% of your operating revenue is allocated to Three Waters operating expenditure. Do you understand? It's of your $113 million of revenue a year or last year, you only spent 12% of that money on Three Waters. It alarmed me to actually see that figure. You can check it out. I can send you. It's all clear. I mean, so that detail, I'll leave it up to you to find out for yourselves, please. I'll just briefly allude or conclude to the stormwater management issues that have happened over the last 20 years, which are part of Three Waters, water services. The Wellington Regional Council manages the flood risk from the two major rivers, Otaki and Waikanae, and all the smaller rural waterways. But it appears from my history and research that KCD claimed to use this as an excuse to not provide stormwater services, as it has stated this directly to rural ratepayers over multiple years, that storm and flood management and protection is the rural ratepayers' responsibility. But you still charge for that. It's in the general rate for storm across all the district, whether they use it or not. And that's as that came out earlier. That's the interesting question to ask: why you're doing that. That's just an example of cross subsidisation. Now, talking to local plumbers, the water service pipe maps are still not up to date, and in many cases completely wrong. And yet you say we're updating our flood models and maps. Still charging for that and the rating services, but not providing a service. So there's just too much detail to go into this. I'm sorry, but 3 minutes is I'll leave it there. Okay.
Sorry to interrupt you in the middle of your
That's
submission.
right, that's okay.
I'm just trying to be vigilant
That's
about
okay.
sticking to the topic. Councillor Wilson.
Thanks very much, John. Just one point, Warwick Reid will be pleased to know that you've elevated him to having been the CEO in 2005. I think he was the Chief Financial Officer.
Was he? I'm sorry, I might have got it wrong slightly, but yeah.
I think it was Glenn Innes back in the day.
I concur with that.
Just in terms of the broader discussion around council's accounts, so Ernst & Young audit council's accounts. So are you not satisfied with Ernst & Young's assumptions?
Yes, I'm sorry that I have previously brought that to the council's attention and to Ernst and to EY. They do disagree with my analysis of the figures. It's still under review, by the way. That's not finished by a long shot, but yeah, I'm sorry that had to be like that.
Okay, that's cool. And just the other thing was, so given what we're here for, and given the information that you do have, do you have an option that you would run with?
As I said, as I said, it's difficult to make a decision, as it is for you guys to make a decision yourselves about having. If you don't have all the information, or it's omitted or left out, you can't decide either. I think if I take on board Michael's option with option 4 is a reasonably good one. My personal preference might be for option 1, but only if it's actually ring-fenced and you do end all the cross-subsidisation and you do work on a user-pays model. See, what it depends on is how you implement whatever choice you make. You know, you can say whatever you like in a document, but what you do in reality can be quite different, and that's how you implement it. It will be how it works. So.
I'm actually, Councillor Cooper.
Oh, sorry, just to jump there. So, how it's implemented, there would be more control or more accountability to the community going with a 1 than a 4. Because of 4, there's competing dynamics within the
correct,
and equity issues and all the rest of it. So would that be?
It should be easier. It should be easier. But as I said, it comes down to how you structure it. I don't believe the CCO is bang for buck at all. The CCO model is expensive to run. I don't think you need to do that. I don't think I don't believe you need a separate board if it's in-house, but you may do that. I'm not sure how you're going to, as I said, I don't know how you're going to implement it.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you for this latest submission. Characteristically detailed and informative. Thank you.
Thank you.
And that just scrapes us in under 2 hours, which is good. So thank you to everybody who's submitted today, particularly Michael. And it's really fascinating to hear this feedback, and certainly some learnings for us in terms of how we present our information, so that people know that we have an open mind and that we are genuinely consulting. And also some really thought-provoking feedback on the proposals that we've made. So I'll now close with the karakia. Kia tauna manakitanga ki runga i a tātou katoa. Kia hua ai te mā kihi e ki ana. Kia toi te kupu, kia toi te reo, kia toi te wairua, kia tau te mauri. Ki roto i a mātou mahi katoa I tēnei rā. Haumi e hui e, tā e ki e. Thank you, everybody.